Who was Glasgow's Iron Man? And how did his wife get stuck living in the circus? Find out now in this episode of Astonishing Glasgow. Walter MacFarlane is one of Glasgow's great Victorian industrialists. In this episode, I'll tell you his story and how he left his name all over this great city. Born in Torrance, just outside Glasgow, in 1817, he worked as a jeweller before serving his apprenticeship as a blacksmith. He spent a decade working at the Moses McCulloch & Co.'s foundry, which stood on Stockwell Street, and then in 1850, with partners Thomas Russell and James Marshall, he founded the WalterMacfarlane & Co. and took over an existing foundry right here at the end of Saracen Lane. You might recognise Saracen Lane better looking in from the other end, as the Saracen foundry sat behind the Saracen Head pub, one of Glasgow's legendary drinking halls. This part of the city and the Saracen Head pub has a truly astonishing history. The main road is the Gallowgate, an ancient highway and pilgrimage route into the city from the East End and one of Glasgow's oldest roads. In the late 1500s, this was the site of Little St Kentigern's Kirk and Yard. St Kentigern, or St Mungo, more about him in episode 69 of Astonishing Glasgow, returned to what we now know as Glasgow in the late 6th century, and was said to hold outdoor services for King Redrath and his people on a small mound called Dow Hill. This was outside the city boundary, so when a chapel was built in 1500, it was known by several names, including St Mungo's Beyond the Walls, St Mungo's in the Fields, and St Mungo's Without Walls. There is nothing left of the Little St Mungo's chapel, and even though I had a really good look while trying not to look so suspicious, I could not find any trace of the Little St Mungo's well, seen here in 1967. I think it might have been behind this block of tenements, but was covered over in the 1970s when the shop units were extended. The reason the small chapel vanished is down to the Scottish Reformation, a local entrepreneur, and the Saracen Head pub. By 1567, Scotland was a Protestant country. The city was no longer run by the bishop, and beside Glasgow Cathedral, the bishop's palace had become the property of the crown. By the 18th century, the bishop's palace was lying derelict. St Mungo's Museum of Religious Life and the Arts now stands on the site and was opened in 1993. This is a 1/3 replica of how the original bishop's palace looked when it was still standing. Now, with the permission of the council in the 1700s, Robert Tennant was able to quarry the palace for stone and used it to construct the first incarnation of the Saracen Head pub, which stood right here in 1755. It opened as an inn, a stable, and a hotel with 36 rooms. It was a fashionable establishment, patronised by nobility and the lords of the judiciary, lawyers and shit. In 1788, the first ever mail coach from London to Glasgow arrived at the Saracen Head, and it remained the Royal Mail stop for the next 30 years. The Saracen Head also became popular with authors and poets, with famous names like Samuel Johnson, James Boswell, Walter Scott, and most famously, Robert Burns, who stayed at the inn on several occasions during his many visits to Glasgow. Perhaps they all drank from the Delftware punch bowl that the inn once owned. Broken and repaired many times, it is now in the care of Glasgow museums and was on display at the People's Palace before it closed for renovation in 2024. Robert Tennant died bankrupt in 1757, and the Saracen Head continued to operate here until 1791, when trade fell off after the opening of hotels nearer the centre of the city. William Miller, not that one, bought the building and converted it into shops with apartments above. The upper floors were removed around 1904. After two other incarnations of the Saracen Head pub, the current Saracen Head pub was built in 1904 on the opposite corner of Saracen Lane from where the original Saracen Head stood. That sounds really confusing. This Sarah Head is famous as the location of the Last Supper in Billy Connolly's crucifixion sketch from 1974.
By the way, the Last Supper, it actually happened in a small tavern known as the Saracen's Head Inn.
By the 70s, it had a reputation. The house specialty was white tornado. All the dregs and slops were tipped into a ceramic sherry barrel and could be purchased by the pint, a concoction that is said to have eaten a hole through the floor where the tap dripped. The bar was renovated in 1994, and I did try and shoot some video inside, especially as inside it is said that there is an original manuscript written by Robert Burns, and there's also said to be the skull of Maggie Wall, the last person burned as a witch in Scotland in 1657. But I was unable to gain access, so you're just going to have to go along and get a drink yourself, and tell them Astonishing Glasgow sent you. Now that was a hell of a big tangent in a video about Walter MacFarlane, but it does explain why his first foundry, located behind the pub, was called the Saracen Foundry. Just like St Mungo's Well, there is no real evidence of Walter's foundry here now, as by 1862 it had outgrown this site. You might think the MacFarlane Street 2 blocks away from the Saracen Head Inn has something to do with Walter MacFarlane, but it doesn't. It's actually in honour of Alexander MacFarlane, a Glasgow-born merchant and slave master in Jamaica. He bequeathed all his telescopes and astronomical equipment to Glasgow University, who opened their first observatory on this street in 1757. MacFarlane needed to find somewhere with a vast amount of land to build his new forge and housing for his workers, and this is why he headed north to Postle Park. Just keep in mind this is not how he did it, he didn't have a car. He purchased 100 acres of the Postle estate as well as Postle House in 1860. He demolished the house and renamed the land Postle Park, which had a population of 10 people in 1872. By 1891, that population had grown to around 10,000. Postle was perfect for his needs. He had plenty of land to expand his foundry, yet was nice and close to the city. More importantly, he had direct access to 2 railway lines. The new foundry was up and running by 1890, and right here at 73 Hawthorne Street, opposite Saracen Street, was the grand entrance to the Saracen Foundry, still named after the pub it once stood behind on the Gallowgate. The ornate Gothic entrance and dome of the foundry was designed by the architect James Boucher, and his work with Boucher would be MacFarlane's key to success. The business was founded on the manufacture of sanitary ware, downpipes, gutters, taps, urinals, etc. But when MacFarlane employed the best Glasgow architects of the day, including John Burnett, Alexander Greek Thompson and James Sellers, to design standardised castings which could be used in everything from bandstands to railway stations, from bridges to drinking fountains. It was this idea that made the Saracen Foundry the world leader in cast iron production. To demonstrate how he was using this standardisation in his designs, I need to take you around Glasgow to show you some examples. I will start at the end of Greenhead Street, just next to Glasgow Green, in the Bailey James Memorial Fountain and Canopy. This drinking fountain was originally erected outside Langside Halls on the south side in 1893, and has already featured in episode 50 of Astonishing Glasgow about things that have moved around the city. It honours James Martin, a senior councillor who lived from 1815 to 1892. The key features are the Moorish canopy, decorated with lions, storks and some great owls, with the drinking fountain in the middle. And just in case you're wondering, it doesn't work. Now compare it with the Jubilee Fountain in Rutherglen's Overton Park. The Jubilee Fountain was erected in 1897, just 4 years later, to celebrate Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, and then it was moved from Rutherglen Main Street to Overton Park in 1911. It also features lions, swans and owls, showing the standardisation of parts. But it is different in that it has a crown on the top of the canopy, where James Martin's fountain had a golden eagle. Standardised parts, but with the ability to customise details to suit the customer. Just quickly before I show you the next example, while I'm in Overton Park, I had to check on the bandstand. This too was built by the Saracen foundry and featured in episode 39 of Astonishing Glasgow as it stood in the entrance of the Glasgow Garden Festival. It was set on fire in late 2023, but good news, it will soon be dismantled and restored. So on to my next and more extreme example of MacFarlane's standardised design philosophy, and I need to jump on the subway and head west. They do say there's no such thing as smelly vision, but I bet a good proportion of you can actually smell these pictures as you're watching them. I think Walt Disney would be proud if he had a roller coaster as sugary as the Glasgow subway, and this is after they spent fortunes trying to stabilise it. I love it, it's great fun. In Downhill Park in the west end of the city, there's another Saracen foundry drinking fountain. But this one's not quite as ornate as the other two. But just look at the casting on the base, it is exactly the same. Obviously this one wasn't designed to be underneath a canopy, as on the top it has a tall post for a lamp. I can't help it, I have to try. Nope, still no water. There is one other Walter MacFarlane drinking fountain that I have visited for this video. Now that one's in Edinburgh, and I would usually keep it to Astonishing Glasgow. But this one is so special that it is on the main floor of the National Museum of Scotland, and it is awesome. This too was built at the Saracen foundry. A very different design to the rest, but look a little bit closer. Look at those shields, the storks, the modular construction. All very standardised and easy to construct, just like Lego. Speaking of Lego, there's a Lego version of this fountain inside the Lego version of the museum. Now, as well as fountains, MacFarlane's Saracen foundry produced other items of street furniture, and these were truly cutting edge. Glasgow was not only the first city in the UK to have its very own police force, but it was also the first city in the UK to have police call boxes on the streets to allow constables to communicate with the station. They didn't look like these. This is the Gilbert Mackenzie trench style box of 1929. The first Glasgow police boxes arrived in 1894 and were hexagonal, were painted red and were cast in iron by Walter MacFarlane's foundry in Postle Park. Often criticised for looking like public urinals, one of these boxes stood right here on Hindland Road. I'm not quite sure why this one is green. That really doesn't help it look less like a urinal. But if you've ever wondered why some Glasgow police boxes are red, it's because the first Glasgow police boxes were all red. Possibly the best known building to have come from the Saracen foundry is the Kibble Palace in Glasgow's Botanic Gardens. Just like the Saracen foundry gates, the Kibble Palace was designed in the late 1850s by James Boucher to the commission of John Kibble, the son of a very wealthy industrialist. This is another building to have featured in more detail in an earlier episode of Astonishing Glasgow, this time episode 63 about more moving buildings, as it was first erected at John Kibble's home in Coalport, about 30 miles north of Glasgow. It was re-erected after being sailed up the Clyde in 1873 for the opening of the new Botanic Gardens. In 1874, just a year after the Kibble Palace moved, Walter MacFarlane was able to buy a brand new house not far away in the most prestigious development in the city. Park Circus was the focal point of the new Park District of Glasgow's West End. Construction began in 1857 to the designs of the architect Charles Wilson, which is a bit odd, as the jumper I'm wearing is also a Charles Wilson. I can afford the jumper, but I certainly couldn't have afforded a house here. It took 17 years for number 22 Park Circus to be completed, and it was specifically built for Walter MacFarlane and his wife. He trusted his longtime friend and collaborator James Boucher to design the interior. The interior, and I don't say this lightly, is absolutely spectacular and one of the most stunning in Glasgow. The MacFarlanes filled it with art and sculpture from around the world and the best furniture money could buy. Sadly, Walter wasn't able to enjoy it very long. In 1885, Walter passed away and control of the business passed to his adopted son and nephew, Walter MacFarlane II. Walter MacFarlane Sr. was buried in the only place suitable for a Victorian industrialist, the Glasgow necropolis. Unfortunately, he's buried right at the top of the bloody hill. Someday I'll do a video in more depth about the Glasgow necropolis. It's an amazing place. But one of the more famous graves is right on the side of the hill, and it's William Miller. But this is not the William Miller that bought the Saracen Head pub when Robert Tennant went bankrupt. This is the William Miller who wrote the poem Wee Willie Winkie. I can only apologise for what you're about to hear. Wee Willie Winkie running through the doon, up the stairs, down the stairs in his night goon, rapping at the windy, crying at the lock, are all the bairns in their bed for now it's 8 o'clock. Yeah, well, I had to run up this hill, so the least you could do is listen to me singing that. This was the most prestigious section of the necropolis, where Walter MacFarlane is surrounded by other merchants, ship owners, politicians and industrialists. His tomb features his likeness cast into a bronze panel on the front. It does look like there were once 2 other bronze panels or details either side, but those must have been stolen over the years. With Walter now deceased, the plan had always been to sell number 22 Park Circus upon his death, but this became a lot harder than expected. Glasgow was in the middle of an economic downturn and there was a crash in the housing market in the 1890s. His widow chose to live at number 22 Park Circus temporarily until a buyer could be found, but that temporary turned into 14 years. In the end, Walter MacFarlane II would take possession and live here until 1932, when he too would pass away. After his death, Walter's widow sold 22 Park Circus to an Italian social club known as the Casa d'Italia. After World War II, the building became the Italian consulate, and then in 1990 it was acquired by developers who in 1994 leased the building to Glasgow City Council. The City Council used it as a registry office for marriages, which is why I have a very personal connection to the building. On the morning of March the 16th, 2012, as if I remembered that by heart, this is where Mrs. Astonishing and me tied the knot. We made our own bit of astonishing history right here. Only 3 months after my big day, the council's lease expired and the registry office closed. 22 Park Circus went back into private hands. It came up for sale in 2024, but I was a little bit short on the £2.5 million asking price. I need a few more subscribers before I can move into this building. No, I need a lot more subscribers before I can move into this building. So while you're here, please hit those like and subscribe buttons if you would be so kind. It won't help me live in Park Circus, but it will help me continue to make Astonishing Glasgow videos, so thank you very much. For the 1901 Great Exhibition, held just down the hill in Kelvingrove Park, Walter MacFarlane II provided the centrepiece of the exhibition in the shape of the Saracen fountain. Designed by David Watson Stevenson, the fountain is 40 foot high, and in keeping with the rest of the MacFarlane range, it reused the castings of the figures Stevenson had produced to surround the statue of John Platt, the MP for Oldham and Greater Manchester. His statue is in Alexandra Park, Manchester, which is an odd coincidence that will become clear soon. The Saracen fountain was presented to the people of Glasgow by Walter MacFarlane after the Great Exhibition had ended, and it stood in Kelvingrove Park for the next 11 years. Thankfully, it wasn't demolished. It was moved east and can still be found inside Alexandra Park. But this Alexandra Park is in Glasgow, not the Alexandra Park in Oldham where David Platt stands. When I visited the park, I couldn't believe it. I was staring at the map of the park when I suddenly witnessed a murder. Not far into the park and on the right hand side, the fountain is a lot bigger in real life. It's huge. It's also very icy on my visit, so I'm trying to take these pictures without ending up on my bahookie. Over the years, the fountain fell into disrepair until it was fully restored to working order for the year 2000. But yet again, it could do with a spruce up and has at one point been painted black. The figures represent art, science, literature and commerce, and the 12 signs of the zodiac are cast around the centre.
It's called How Can I Tell You I Love You When You're Sitting in My Face.
The basin is 40 feet in diameter, and if only I had brought my ice skates, I could have busted out some moves, though I'm a little bit more Todd Carty than Torval and Dean. The sun's going down and the rain is coming on, so I'm heading home, but I do still have another relic of the Saracen foundry to visit in the city of Glasgow before the end of this video. I'm leaving the gates of Alexandra Park to head west and visit the gates of Victoria Park, though there were a few days between filming, so not surprisingly, the weather has changed. Costing £200 in 1887, which in today's money is £200 plus inflation, these gates were donated by the ladies of Partick, and just like the drinking fountain at Overton Park, they were installed to commemorate Queen Victoria's Jubilee in 1887. They feature Queen Victoria's profile and the coat of arms of Partick, but this is not where they originally stood. They had to be moved to make way for the approach roads for the Clyde Tunnel in the 1960s. The best bit about visiting Victoria Park on a winter's morning is that I can walk to the top of the hill and sit on the number 1 bench before those old tadgers get here.
Caroon bars for 3 o'clock.
Aye, you're well sorted. All you're needing now is the number 1 bench.
You one-legged fat bastard.
It's shocking how little of Walter MacFarlane and the Saracen Foundry's works survive. If you know of any Saracen Foundry cast pieces in the city of Glasgow that I've missed, let me know in the comments section or head to my social media pages. All the links are in the description below. During World War II, a lot of cast iron was collected up and scrapped for the war effort, even though cast iron was pretty much useless for munitions. Saracen Foundry and the company of Walter MacFarlane also suffered during the war and the years that followed. The foundry acted like a beacon to the Luftwaffe during the war, and once the war had ended, they found themselves left behind. Downpipes and guttering was being pressed in aluminium and steel. Then plastics arrived, so there was no call for cast iron plumbing, and tastes had changed. MacFarlane's designs were now outdated. The foundry did struggle on, making architectural panels like the ones seen here on St Vincent Street. It also produced some of the new K6 phone boxes for the post office, but it wasn't enough. The business was sold to Allied founders in 1965, and other than the Saracen Bar on Saracen Street, there's very little left of the Saracen Foundry now in Postle Park. The forge was closed and demolished in 1967. The site is now occupied by Allied vehicles who repair accident-damaged cars and convert vans for disabled users. A sad end to what was once an industrial powerhouse of Glasgow. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. If you want to help me continue to make stories of Astonishing Glasgow, you can grab some merch over on the Spreadshirt page. You can donate directly using the Super Thanks button. Every penny is gratefully received, and these are the superstars who did that after the last episode. You can also get in touch via the comments section or through the Facebook and Instagram pages. All the links are in the video description below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time in Astonishing Glasgow. Right, I'm going home for sherbet fountain and some iron brew. Oh, that could be an explosive combination. Well, once I go back up the hill and get my camera, I am. See ya.